Do you love mythology? Hi, I'm Allison. I'm a professional mythologist and archetypal expert, and this is the first of a new series that I'm doing here on YouTube to talk about how I work with mythology, what it means to be a professional mythologist, and how archetypes can actually help us live a life that is happier, more filled with purpose, and more filled with meaning. So everything I do here on this channel and on other social media channels is to share some of how I work with myths and archetypes in order to help people live their lives more effectively. Now, the reason that I get into this work in the first place is because I was trying to figure this out for myself. I had a really rough start in life. I had a childhood that was a little bit rocky. And from the beginnings of it, I turned to stories and then eventually specifically to myths in order to learn what I could from them to first off, find a place of respite from difficult things in life, the way that we do with stories. You know, we watch films, we play video games, we read books, we do all of those things in order to have a place that's safe outside of the travails of our regular life. So that's how I got started with this. I studied mythology in graduate school. I started doing it professionally shortly thereafter. I grew a very unusual career over many years out of figuring out how to share this. And now what I'm doing here on YouTube is I want to tell you a little bit more about what it means to do that work and how it can be helpful. So the purpose of this is entirely to help anyone that's listening figure out how to make their lives better through an application of mythology. So if you're into that, if you love mythology, if you have favorite myths, I hope that you will hit that follow button, stick with me a little bit. And I love to talk to people in the comments and answer questions. So because this is a new thing for me to share on YouTube versus on other social media applications, I'm going to be learning how to do that effectively for this particular audience. So if you're listening on YouTube, welcome. I'm really glad that you found me. I'm going to be sharing a lot more over the coming months with the YouTube audience specifically, which is going to allow me to go into a little bit more length, which is always a blessing because there's a lot to say and a lot to share about myths that may take a little bit longer. So welcome. I'm happy you're here. I'm happy to be here myself. I'm going to introduce you to my little friend here. That's Remy. He's my cat, one of my cats. And I'm sitting here in my office in rural Vermont. And this is where I do my work. This room is surrounded by bookshelves, books about esoteric topics, including mythology and archetypes, of course. And really the first thing that I want to share here on this new platform for me is about how I view this mythology work and why I do it. So myths are stories that are left behind for us by the people that came on the planet before us, right? So we know that what have I got here? I've got Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is an ancestor leaving behind his work. It's telling us about myths. We've got the Odyssey here. I'm doing a series on the Odyssey. So this is a very well-known myth, right? This is a very common one that most people in the West have either heard of or maybe read or heard stories from. You know about Polyphemus and the way Odysseus causes him to lose his eye. That's a story from the Odyssey. Lots of other stories. It's a fantastic adventure story. It's one of the greatest ones ever written. It's one of the first ones ever written. But it's not just that, right? It's a great story. I mean, it's got great adventures. There's romance, there's battles, there's thrills, there's life and limb being torn asunder. I mean, all kinds of crazy things happen in the pages of this book. But what else is happening is it's the story of a man trying to figure out how to get home. And he's pretty bad at it. And there's issues with cleverness and ego and hubris, which the Greeks love writing myths about. So if hubris is something you struggle with, there's a lot to offer to you in Greek mythology specifically, but there's a lot we can learn here, and we get to have a good time reading the stories or hearing about them. We've got a new version of the Odyssey coming out here in a few months as I record this in January of 26. In July, there's a new Christopher Nolan version of the Odyssey coming out. So we've told this story over and over, but we can also learn a lot. So the way I see it is this. We have advice left to us from people who are trying to figure out their lives the same way that we are. And they left their advice behind in the form of art, and specifically in the form of myths. So we've got stories that have been told, and this work started to kind of crack open for me when I figured out that it's such a human impulse to want to share and give advice, right? Often is obnoxious. We are given advice sometimes by people that we don't want advice from and we didn't ask for advice from. But once I recognized how insidious that is and how common it is, that, you know, if you found something great that made your life better, it will be almost impossible to get you to shut up about it. And we all know someone like this, right? You have your friend who went vegan, or who found a new workout program, or went keto, or found a great new restaurant, or a great plumber, or even some kind of cautionary tale, like, don't go to that restaurant, there was mold in the food. You want to tell people, right? You want to share that. And we see that impulse playing out in our culture all the time, every single day. If you've ever been working out at a gym and had some dude come over and try to give you advice on your form, that's some kind of a toxic version of that. That's happened to me before. And if you're a woman, it's probably happened to you too, if you've been in a gym. So this is a very human impulse. And sometimes it can be toxic, but sometimes it can be wonderful. And what I see happening in these myths often is, let me tell you a great story. Let me share with you in the format that you prefer, which is storytelling. It's the best way to communicate anything to a human. Let me share with you something that happened to me, or to happen to someone that I heard of, or someone that I know. And it's gonna teach you some things about how to handle a similar situation. So now, the story of the Trojan horse is not from the Odyssey. It's actually from the Iliad. And that was, if you are at all familiar with that, I'm surprised sometimes I meet people that have never heard of the Trojan horse. I'm just going to tell you really quickly. They've been at war with Troy for 10 years, and they're essentially in a stalemate. And Odysseus comes up with the idea that they're going to pretend to give up and go away, but they're going to leave a gift for the Trojans in the form of a giant wooden horse. But what they're going to do is they're going to hide inside of it, and then as soon as they get the gift inside the gates, because they can't get past the gates of the walls of Troy, the soldiers will come pouring out and let the other soldiers in that were hiding outside. And that's exactly what happened. That's where we get the phrase, beware of Greeks bearing gifts, right? This is a Trojan horse. I mean, we use that phrase to describe things that look fine on the outside, but are really secretly terrible on the inside, and they're villainous on the inside. But they won the Trojan War. So now Odysseus is going to go home. And this is the story of him trying to get there and failing to for another 10 years. So Odysseus is away from home for 20 years for all of this. And okay, so now we've got a few things that we can learn from the story of the Trojan horse, right? I mean, it's a useful thing to do in business because really what is he doing? He's solving a problem. They have a problem. They're at a stalemate. They cannot go home until this war has been won. And they've got problems with Achilles, and if you've read the Iliad, you know a little bit what I'm talking about, or go and look it up on Wikipedia or something, and you'll see what I mean. But he managed to solve a problem that the Greek army was having. Now, your company may be having a problem, or you may be having a problem in your personal life that needs a good and new and unique solution that's never been thought of before, and Odysseus is really good at that. So, okay, so that's just one small example. Myths are filled with them. Myths are filled with heroes solving problems in ways that were new. And what are they doing? They're like saying, hey, you know what? We tried this thing and it really worked for us, or don't do this. This was a really bad idea. So that's what they are. So we all have problems. We all have ways that we want our lives to be better. And we've got this source of thousands of years worth of storytelling of people explaining how they solve problems too. And if we can look below the surface of them, we can start to understand that these are full of wisdom that we can therefore glean from and learn how to fix our own lives. And that's really at the heart of what I do. So my idea here is that, okay, we've got all these old stories. We've got a lot of people that are hurting and want to make their lives better. Let's put those two things together and let me be the facilitator of making that match so that anybody who wants to can make a decision about their lives that's going to make it better. So we've got this idea from a guy named Joseph Campbell called The Hero's Journey. And what he did in his book, Hero with a Thousand Faces from 1949, this was an ancestor of mine. His work was very much the inspiration for my own career. I discovered it when I was in my young adulthood. And it's this really great recognition of a pattern of what happens to heroes. So he says, essentially in his core parts is the hero leaves their community, they go away, they go into the underworld, they leave the place that they came from, they go through something, and that's a metaphorical underworld, right? So you go into the land of the dead, you go into the land of the fairies, you go into the land of the gods, whatever. You leave where you were and you go somewhere else. And you have all of these adventures and struggles that you have to overcome. You meet allies, you meet villains, you meet temptations, you gain a treasure out of that, and then you come back, you return to your community you're changed by that experience, and you now have something to share that's going to make you useful and helpful to the people that you left behind. So this is kind of the pattern that's at the heart of many of our myths. And what I find really interesting about this recognition is we go through these things all the time. Anytime your life changes in a way, like you get married or you get divorced or you get sick or you get healthy or your kid is born or your kid grows up and moves out. I mean, these are all deaths of the way our lives used to be and rebirths into the ways our lives are going to change into this new version. So once we start to recognize that this is something that happens to us all the time and we see where we are in the cycle at any given time, understanding myths can be really helpful because it's a little bit predictive. It shows us what's going to come next. It allows us to know what to do when we have a situation that mirrors something in a myth. We can look and recognize when we have allies and when villains show up and when temptations show up. And we can recognize often when it's time to leave the underworld and come back. So that's a big part of the heart of what I'm doing here, is to kind of sum it up, is recognizing that we can learn from ancestors from the past in these old stories, learn how to go through our heroic journeys, go through that stage of being in the underworld, and importantly, how to come out of it at the end, because that's also really hard. And then what you get to do, this is the greatest part of it, in my opinion, you get to now, having gone through all of that, share what you've learned, okay? So other people from the past shared what they learned, and they gave us these myths, and they gave us other pieces of art too. Now we have a tool and some kind of guidance to help us figure out our own shit, right? We're going through it. And then now, when it's time, we get to become the ancestors that the next generation needs. So when you're done going through the shittiest thing that ever happened to you in your life, your cancer or your divorce or whatever it is, the best part of it is knowing that our pain and our trauma and everything that was hard about what we just went through was not done in vain, that there was actually some beautiful thing that came out the other side of it. And learning how to pull the treasure out of the most difficult moments of our lives, while we would never want to have gone through that, if we can start to recognize the ways in which we can pull wisdom and treasure out of those hard moments, and just the act of doing that itself makes the experience more meaningful and more palatable and more bearable, if you will, knowing that you can help somebody else out. So if a crime was committed against you, say you were assaulted or something, now that's a terrible thing to have gone through. If someone robbed you of everything you owned, beat you up, almost killed you. Okay, so that's a terrible thing. And that should never have happened to you. But bad things will happen to you. It may not be that. That's never happened to me. Other bad things have. But your thing is going to be different. You're going to struggle with things that I never would dream of. And I've struggled with things that you could never dream of, that you would never have to worry about. But okay, we whatever it is, we're going through it. And here's the best part, is when we get to the end and we start to learn through this method how to recognize our own lives as myths, how to pull the treasure out of those difficult situations. Because if you got to say there's a particular place that's high in crime and you got assaulted there and you were robbed and you were almost killed, I guarantee you, just about, for most people, that if you found a way to prevent that from happening to someone else, you would speak out. You would do that. And if you weren't ready to do that, if you're still in the hospital healing up and you can't, well, then you're not out of the underworld yet. You are still healing. You're still on your journey. But I think that most people, if something really terrible happened to them and there was a way to stop that from happening to someone else in the future, they would do what they had to do to get that message out. And that's really the moment that this work starts to become really valuable, because it's not just that we survived the hardest moments of our lives. Myths teach us how to be transformed by them so that we don't just survive them, so that actually we are transformed in such a way that we can bring something new and better out into the world, just to make the path a little bit easier for the next person. And now they are prepared to do that for when they go through their journey. It's not that things are going to stop sucking as when it comes to being a human being. That's always going to be true. But if we can make their path a little bit easier, and that's going to allow them to push the wisdom forward a little bit more, to make the path just that much easier, infinitesimally easier for the next person, this is the way that we can be in community with each other as human beings, that we can find purpose, happiness, and meaning in our lives, despite all the hardship of it. This is the beautiful promise of mythology. Excuse me. This is why I do this. I have gone through some horrific things in my life. Myths have taught me how to pull the treasure out of those experiences and share them on. And I already have done this. I've done this for many years. I've helped people change their lives. And it's because of the pain that I went through, right? I was able to alchemize that in such a way that I was able to share a message that would help somebody else down the road and make their path a little bit easier. And that's what I want you to do too. So if you're still listening to this, thank you. I hope that this interests you. I imagine it does if you're still listening. And what I'm going to continue to share here on this channel is a little bit longer form versions of how to do this very specifically, talking about specific myths, specific archetypes, specific methods for trying this. And I also have ways that you can work with me directly. So if this interests you and you're really in it right now and you need help, call me, schedule some time with me, and we can talk about my coaching program. I have retreats on offer. We have one coming up in Malta in a few months, and we can work together directly. That is possible. So I guess what I would say here now is thank you for listening this far. I hope that this speaks to you. If you love mythology as much as I do, I think that you'll really enjoy this work. And if you're just in it and you're trying to figure things out for yourself, there's going to be a lot here for you. So I'm so glad that you're here, and I will continue to share about this because I can't shut up about it. And Remy might not always be here, but I will be. And I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.